Welcome to the first interview of Valheim Mod Reviews. I am Ruijven, and today I'm speaking with Balrond, a notable mod creator for the Valheim game. Hey Balrond, how you doing today?
Hello, feeling great. How about you?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So today we'll be discussing the creativity that fuels making mods with some great insight about his background and the processes that Balrond uses to create a Valheim mod. But first, Balrond, tell us a little bit about yourself so we can get to know you a little bit better.
Okay, so let's start simple. As everyone else knows me as Balrond, maybe as the second nickname Astafarios. 34 years old, programmer from Poland, part-time working in game design, and got very deep into making mods for the Valheim community.
And I know you from a mod review that I did called Balrond Shipyard. Like, how many mods do you have on the Valheim community so far?
I mean, in the past I had multiple mods, but most of them got taken down when I had a break from mod making. So right now there's like 5 mods currently on, at least those noticeable, uh, like the mod you reviewed, the Shipyard or Humanoid Randomizer, Balloon Containers, there are a few of them that actually put notice into player count. So hopefully my next creation will also succeed and become pretty popular.
That's great. I really enjoy the mods that you have out there, and I've always really wondered like how you got into modding for Valheim. What's the path that led you to this point?
Well, I never really planned to go into Valheim modding or even play Valheim. I got the Valheim as a gift from a friend. We started play together, but it was very early on when the game just came out, and I felt like there's not enough things to do. So we started another playthrough, but with mods trying to ump some content, but still there wasn't enough things that I thought like they should be here or could be here. So I started deep diving into mod community and started to learn how to actually make my own mods, and that's where it all started.
And as someone that has recently begun creating my own mod as well, I know for a fact that it's not terribly difficult to get into modding, but it is a steep learning curve. But before we get into that, are there any other games that you make mods for or that you play?
Currently, I don't really make mods for the games. In the past, I made some for Orion or a few other survival games every now and then, but I never really published anything. Those were mostly my private creations to just make my own game more enjoyable. And Valheim was the first game I actually started publishing my mods for. And other than that, I mostly play RPG games or city builders when I have some free time, but mostly it's occupied by making mods.
If you're like me, then making the mod has almost become the game itself. Is that correct?
Yes, pretty much. Like at some point, you start playing, for example, as said, Valheim, and then you feel like, well, I can make something for it. I can make something better. And just you turn off the game, you open up Unity and your tools, and you just start creating stuff.
That conversation came from before when we spoke at a previous time, where we were talking about game design. Can you tell us more about your experience in game design and how that shaped how you approach Valheim and doing your mods?
As I started as programmer, mostly a front-end designer, later on I had a short period of work when I worked as a game designer. That gave me a little look behind the curtain of what is actually enjoyable for people, what they look for, how some problems should be approached, and overall a mindset that you need to go into, and how many small things are being connected when even adding a simple item to the game that grow on me as well as me being a programmer. So they kind of became interchangeable things for me.
And when you became a video game design, what kind of motivated you to pursue that kind of career?
Well, the first part is I never really planned to even be a programmer. I wanted to be an artist, but that didn't work out. I later on ended up being a programmer, and that works out pretty well. But then I was lacking that creative motivation, that creative output. So I started go deeper into the games and found my field in the game design where I could work both with graphics and with the code. And that made me happy.
Making mods definitely allows that creativity process to shine through. And for someone like me who's brand new to this, and maybe many people out there as well who are sitting there saying, I would love to make a mod. I have this great idea. I can't find anyone to make it for me, or I don't know how to even reach out. What advice would you give to someone that's looking to start a career in video game design or just like slowly picking up the tools?
First is gathering the knowledge, right? We start with small things. You start searching in Google with how to make a game or how to make a mod slash name of the game. You start searching maybe for some Discord community who could help you out, get you into the things. First and foremost, you cannot be afraid of asking questions and asking for help. You do not know a thing. You need to start somewhere and find someone who knows and is willing to tell you something about it. Of course, it costs a lot of time and a lot of effort, but it's like with every other skill you want to acquire. It always takes time learning. So do not rush. Do not see that you're not achieving anything bigger or greater. You always start with small steps, and then you slowly move higher as your knowledge grows, as your contact grows, and as your skills advance.
And I want to mention something else about that too. You said, time and experience and learning, it takes time to get all that, and that's what you really have to pay for. But most of these things that we use, like Unity and Visual Studio and Blender and some other tools that you're going to share with us later, those are all free. They're all open source. And so you don't even have to pay much to get into the modding or the video game kind of process, do you?
No, in reality, you don't even have to pay a single penny. With amount of knowledge that is there for free on YouTube and many other portals, with amount of tools that are there for free, game engines that are ready to go, assets and libraries that are just free to download, you can kickstart your project without a single penny to your wallet and still start gathering knowledge. It's not about going high end and investing a massive fortune into it. No, you start with small tools, small things, with no real extra costs. Because if you, for example, at the end of your journey finds like it's not really for you, you didn't lose anything. You only gain knowledge, skills, and something valuable for your life in the future. Because game design is not just about games, it's not just about programming itself, it's not just about computers. It's about realizing what is fun, what is enjoyable, what people really want to have as an entertainment. So those skills will bring you somewhere else, maybe to advertisement, for example.
Well, that's great feedback on that too, because it's always hobbies are expensive usually, and I'm assuming that if you have a computer that can run Valheim, your computer probably could run most of these other programs as well.
Yes, it could. Of course, there's some here and there problems whenever you save your Unity project or want to export the models and everything. Sure, having a better, stronger PC lessens the time you need to wait for it to build up. But otherwise, you don't really need a powerhouse machine to do so. It only speeds up the process, but is not required to.
Well, I'm excited to hear more about this. Let's get more into the mod creating side. So, what are some of the most important principles that you follow when you're designing a mod? What are some basic like guidelines and instructions that you adhere to?
Well, and for me, the most simple things are it needs to be fun, it needs to be simple, as I've already said, it needs to bring a value to the game, it needs to feel complete. Other thing would be it needs to be immersive and seamless. You don't really want your users to distinguish between what is the original part of the game and what is added by you. It means that you were able to follow the details and works of the game developers. And of course, your creations should not do any harm to the game, to other mods, or to the players, or in any form of the content. So, an invasive mod is, no matter how great it is, it's still invasive and it's still disturbing in some way.
That's something that I've noticed in some of the reviews I've looked at least some of the mods, and it's always, does this mod fit with the game? And I know sometimes it doesn't play a very important factor to some of our Valheim players out there, but for me, it's always, does it really fit with this game, or is it something extra that doesn't really, not going to say not have a place in it because the game is pretty open, but does it really gel with it? Does it really have a place to really make it feel like it's part of the game originally instead of just something that you've added into it.
Yes, this is the place where the game design skills actually come to place. You need to understand the game, understand what is the basic game loop. So, what is the repeatable behavior that the player goes through? What is the actual theme of the game? So, in case of Valheim, our theme is Vikings, is Norse mythology. So, we want to stick to this. So, then what is the right period for this to happen? Well, you can go a little bit offshore because this is still a fantasy game, but we want something that be quite accurate for the age of the Vikings, actually. So you do a little research on the history, on mythology, what is possible, how things look like. So, as said, the game design is not just about technical stuff you do on your computer, it's also about doing a research in the topic of things that are outside.
That's useful for any kind of game design, whether it's for a mod or for it's a whole game design too, because you want to kind of adhere to some kind of sense of consistency.
Exactly. You want that to be an accurate representation of an age, of a story, of mythos, of whatever you're creating. You want it to be adequate to the story you're creating. Of course, you can go offshore with your ideas and go wild with like a fantasy term, very, very rich stuff. Or maybe those names on those mythos you're using are just kind of like a soft references to some of the stuff in the game. So you kind of can connect the dots, but it's not like a straightforward. In terms of Valheim, we have a very straightforward storyline. We are a Viking who is dropped to another realm to prove himself before he goes to Valhalla. That already tells us a lot about what we'll be working with and what could fit into the game.
Before we get too much more into the design process of that, because I believe me, that's something that I really want to get to in just a moment. I am curious because we did mention it before about some of the tools that we can use. What kind of tools do you use or find yourself using? What's available for us as mod creators to create these mods that are consistent with our games?
Anyway, first and foremost, it's Unity, and of course the Valheim itself when it comes to modding Valheim. You need to first extract the project using, for example, tool like Asset Reaper, and then create it and launch it in Unity with the proper version for the proper build of the game. Then we have the code part that goes with Visual Studio. Depends on the version and on the year you'll be using it and viewing this video. Currently, I use 2022 version. Later on, probably a newer version would be advised. Then we have some simple notes making and editing text files, so that could go with Visual Studio Code or Notepad++. Then the important one is looking into the game DLL files, so where the code is for the game. For that purpose, I use Dotpick, not a free tool that lets you just open up DLL files and read through the code made by the game creators, as well as other mod developers if the code is not secured. Then for any 2D works, graphic icons, textures, I just use Krita because Photoshop is, well, paid and kind of expensive, so simple tools like that will do the thing. You mentioned before Blender, so yes, I do use Blender as well for any 3D graphic editing I need to do. And then is one extra thing that I find very important, and it's a mod for the Valheim itself. It's called Unity Explorer that lets you check out inside the game when the game is running what are the current values for some object, what are the connections, if everything is loaded correctly. So it gives you like a full debug view of the game runtime. Later on, when I started to make more complex mods, try to debug why something is not working or not working as I thought it would be, I could just use Unity Explorer, hover over the object, get a table with all the parameters, what are the current values, what are the current connections, and just see like, oh, this is not really loading, so I can just go check why it is not loading correctly, why the value is not changing. But the logic you wanted to put in place, the changes you wanted to happen, are not really happening, but there's no error as well. So this helps you to actually figure out those things that you don't see with those big red arrows in front of your face.
Let's go through the process of creating a mod, especially for someone that's never done this before, or someone like me who's in the process of learning how to do it for the first time. Walk us through and let us know kind of like what you do and the steps. And we have our tools now. What do we expect and what do we do with these things?
Okay, so first comes the idea, right? It always starts at it. So you have your first idea, you start scribing it down, making your notes with Notepad++ or Visual Studio Code, or even the basic Notepad, whatever. Just make notes, those are important. Then start asking a question. What does this mod really add? Well, how does it add? When and how does it works? What things should be happening in the game? You need to ask as many questions yourself as you can, and you will need to answer those questions. When answering, you will find the problems of how do I do that, or how do I add this object, or how do I make this monster do the thing I want him to do. And those problems then needs to be described, and you will need to find the answers for those problems. And those will be the main cases for how you create your mod. Because the base path is pretty easy. Your idea about adding a simple item, sure, no real hard things to do, but then you come up with some new ways of creating items, or maybe you want your boss first to do a monologue, to walk around, tell people something, destroy a village, and then starts the normal boss fight. You will need to think about how do you implement this type of a behavior, and those questions will need to be written down, and the answers will need to be find out through the code. So then we have the next step after writing all those questions and all those answers you could ask. You still have probably a lot of questions that are more technical. So you start refining your idea. You start to open up, for example, .pick and go into the code. Find the scripts that you're interested for. For example, if you're editing a monster, you want to do something for the monster, you probably will be interested in a script called Monster AI, and you will want to edit it, see how those fields work, see what those fields are, what types of methods they are, and what do you need to connect to. You write yourself then a clear scope in both terms of a content and of a technical scope of the mod, because you don't really want to go overboard or go sideways whenever you start designing things, because then you will never finish your mod. From the moment you already have your notes, you have your answers, you know where to search for the code, what you will be wanting to connect to in the game, you can launch your Unity project design and start making your elements. Then you will know as well what you're still missing. For example, maybe you will need to copy or maybe design yourself some visual effects. Maybe you will miss some sounds and you will need to search for them on some cloud library of free sounds, or maybe you can just reuse some of the sounds that are already in the game. You want to make not everything, but at least the basics for it, because you want to, as quickly as possible, go to the prototype. You want to make a simple skeleton of a mod. You want to put the code in. You want to build the DLL using the Visual Studio at this point, and you want to add it to the game. When you're done with all that, you will see, of course, probably a big list of red errors. Stop for a moment, go through the log file that is always attached whenever you launch your modded game, read it through, see what is not being loaded, see what's not working. Go back to Unity, go back to your code, try to find the issue, redo it, and do it again and again and again and again. It's a repeatable process of refining your ideas, refining your code, and refining your models inside Unity. I think that's sums up the process from the start to finish, basically.
This sounds like a lot of technical detail. And so my next question is, how do you get the creativity side of it? How do you balance that with all the technical constraints when you're designing a mod? Because all the stuff you just mentioned, you probably would have lost me if I had no intention of making a mod before, just because I'm like going, oh, this sounds like a really huge process. But I know for a fact that like there's a huge creativity side of this.
Okay, so when we go with the creativity and we have a cool idea, we want to actually put everything that comes into our mind into it, every detail. We don't really see limitations, the size, complexity, all things that I described already are irrelevant. You just want to make something cool, something ambitious, something amazing, and something you will feel good about yourself. Those ideas still will require notes. They will need to be written down, and you will need to find a way how to actually make them work. So the creative part is first, the technical part is the second one. How do I put it in the game? Do I know how to put it in the game? Do I know somebody who knows how to put it in the game? Or I know where to search for the information how to put it in the game? Because whatever the great idea is, you will need to find a way to implement it in the game. So at the very end, there's always that little technical part that you will need some help with, either from somebody or from some source.
From what I've noticed, the mod community, those who create the mods, there's been a lot of outpouring of, "Hey, what can I do to help?" As soon as someone really finds out that you're interested in making a mod, there's a lot of people out there that want to help those people get better with it too, and they want to help them answer some of those questions. But it's always one of those fundamental things too that if you are interested in making a mod, don't assume that anyone is going to do it for you. If you want a mod that someone's going to do it for you, you can always commission one from somebody to make that for you. But if you really want to get into it, the biggest part of that is learning it for yourself.
Yes, so the big part is going forward, going out to the people. I mean, in this case, you don't really go out of your house, but you need to go out to the web. You need to talk with people. You need to get to know people and get to know your stuff, what you want to make. Uh, People on the community are helpful. Most of the cases, they will try to answer your questions, tell you something about like something is maybe too hard, maybe try something simpler for if you are starting just your journey with mods, or they will give you a whole technical explanation of what you need to do. Something similar to what I did just a few moments ago, but with even more technical details, and probably some links where to search for the information. So always is better to make a proper scope for your project, like what you really want to do. You will need to know what to ask for, because people in the mod community will be really happy to help you, but you will need to describe what you really want to achieve. And this sometimes may become hard because you have one idea and you thought like this is a self-explanatory thing, but your question follows up with 10 more questions actually. How do you want to make this being done? Because usually there is more than one way of achieving the stuff you want to do.
And so I would tell that to any person making a mod or wanting more information too, is that if you're not getting the answer you're looking for, ask a different question. And you can do that in multiple Discord sites and a lot of these mods on Thunderstore and I think on the Nexus mods too. You can find their Discords listed on those pages with the mod. And it's a great way to get in contact with these people and get more information, especially those mods that you really enjoy having and that you like a lot, because those will be the ones that you may reach out to them and say, "Hey, I really like your mod. How can I do something very similar? Here's my idea." And that could be your way of getting into it.
Exactly. The important, as I said, important part is going out there. So many places, many people, many sources, and as you said, asking the right questions. It's probably the hardest part because this is the same for, let's say, programming or IT or whatever other branch you'll be thinking about. You always need to ask the right questions. Sometimes asking the right question still doesn't help you, but because maybe you didn't ask the right person. If, for example, you start asking me about mods that are made by other mod makers, I might be not able to answer that. I might be not the correct person to ask about. But if you just ask me a general knowledge about mods, I'll be always willing to help.
Join us for part 2 of our interview with Balrond, where we discuss more about mod creation and game design. And in the meantime, check out the links below for tools and resources.